everyone, and welcome to Texas AFT's Supporting Public Schools virtual forum. My name is Denise Garcia. I'm an educator and leader of the Brownsville Educators Stand Together Texas AFT. This evening, we're proud to host one of Texas AFT's endorsed candidates for the state, for the candidate for the state representative, District 38, Erin Elizabeth Gamez. Throughout the evening, we'll be having a conversation about the issues affecting public schools each day. We'll discuss how our endorsed candidate plans to help improve our community's schools, support our school employees, and better this educational experiences of students throughout the state.
My name is Adriana Lopez, educator and proud member of the Brownsville Educators Stand Together Texas AFT. We'd like to thank and welcome Erin Elizabeth Gamez, candidate for the state representative for District 38. At this time, I'd like to ask Erin to please introduce herself.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. My name is Erin Elizabeth Gamez, and I am your Democratic candidate for state representative of District 38. I want to thank AFT so much for hosting this beautiful live stream public forum for us all to come together and talk about why it's so important that we come out with a fierce pride to vote for our next state representative and, a fierce champion and advocate for public education in our community. I am 32 years old. I have been an attorney since I was 24 years old. I have been litigating down here for almost 8 years now. I absolutely love it, and I'm so grateful to be endorsed by all of our local educators unions, be that BEST, AOBE, TBEA, AFT, TSTA. I am so excited that all of our educators can come together on one issue, and that is that that I am fiercely committed to fighting for our children and our educators in our BISD here locally in Brownsville. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Erin. Our first question to you says, what makes you uniquely qualified to stand up for the voice of educators in the state legislature?
And I love this question because I love to discuss what I do on a day-to-day basis, and that is litigate. Individuals don't come to me when they have something nice to say. Individuals don't come to me when they're having a good time in life or when they want to talk about things to celebrate. Clients come to me when they are experiencing devastating times in their life, when they're going through trials and tribulations, and they trust me to take those issues and run with it in a very public forum, and that is our judicial system. They trust me in their most difficult times in life to compassionately and empathetically advocate their problem to a group of strangers, that is 12 of our peers, a jury. And I take that confidence as serious as a heart attack. And I show up every day for teachers, that whether it be in a civil setting, whether it be in a family law setting, whether it be in a criminal setting, I've helped assisted teachers on a multitude of administrative levels. I am a fierce advocate, and I, again, am grateful for the trust that you place in me. And the seriousness with which I take our advocacy here locally is the same seriousness with which I will take your advocacy to the state level. And I am excited and proud to be the voice for our educators. The number one thing that I do as an attorney is I'm never going to make you a promise that I can't keep. And I'm never going to purport to be an expert on something that I'm not. And I'm so excited now to turn around and say AFT, TSTA, BEST, our local educators unions, you are my experts now. You are my field of expertise. And that is why you've trusted me, because you know that I'm going to work with you in our advocacy in Austin. And so I'm so blessed and I'm grateful. And I want to say thank you again for trusting me to carry this sword and the shield.
Thank you. What kind of plan or ideas do you have to combat the classroom censorship attack on educators, referring to a false narrative that is being spun around critical race theory? How will you approach your work in updating the TEKS with what the legislator passed regarding social studies?
This question is really fascinating to me, Ms. Lopez, because in the last 4 years or more, we've seen a dramatic sort of overhaul of the way we used to go about democracy, about the way we used to go about making sure that both sides of the team, so to speak, work together. And this term critical race theory has just recently come about, especially in our last legislature. And I want to say that it's a false straw man. I want to say that this is an issue that got anytime we can't focus on the real issues that matter, and that is funding public schools and ensuring the safety of our children and increasing the morale of our teachers, we create an issue. And this issue, critical race theory, started circulating to hyper politicize a problem that didn't exist. It was brought about by politicians that weren't educators. I've talked to dozens of teachers who told me, Erin, this wasn't something that was broken that needed to be fixed. We are highly qualified, highly trained educators, and we don't need more state interference in the classroom. You trust me to teach your children on a day-to-day basis. Trust that I can teach basic history in a manner that is fair, equitable, and that is non-biased. That doesn't mean that we create an issue that says, look over here, because we don't have time to talk about the lack of transparency in charter funding, because we don't have time to talk about how we're not increasing cost of living and wages for teachers. So if I can get the public very upset about something else to stop focusing on the real issues, and that is teachers' voices and what teachers are saying are necessary, then I'm going to create this issue. So I don't want to spend my time in this upcoming session debating issues that aren't broken in schools. I want to spend my time focusing on how can we bring teachers to Austin to talk about fixing the TEKS and making it easier for teachers to administrate this locally. If this isn't a problem at a local level, I don't want to continue to waste our time on it in Austin. I remember going to school and my parents telling me, Erin, we're going to watch Fox and CNN so that when you go to school, you can discuss current events and you can be a critical thinker. It made me the speaker that I am today. It made me confident to attack and address new issues from both sides. But telling our kids that we can't talk about it at all is not the answer.
And it's very concerning also that there seems to be like an effort to ban books and to start pulling apart the curriculum and what's being taught. And it's just so reminiscent of like, Nazism, things like that of the past that we've tried to escape.
Censorship on any level shouldn't be tolerated. And it's ironic because we use it, on some aspects. And then we say we shouldn't do it at the federal level. But we can't do it in schools. It's anti-democratic, and I don't think it's good for creating critical thinkers in our children who are going to be our future leaders of tomorrow, that we want to be actively engaged in current events and especially in their communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Inflation combined with historical underfunding of educator salaries has cost educators and school employees real economic gains over the last decade. If elected, what will you do to bring about real salary increases for educators and school employees?
This issue is one of the most sensitive issues that I've been talking about with teachers. It goes, so far beyond the teacher morale being at an all-time low. I talk to teachers on a daily basis who cry to me about how overstressed, overworked, underappreciated, and most certainly underpaid they feel. And I don't think they come talking to me intending to cry, but the conversation evokes so much emotion and they feel like they need to tell me this, and I need to see it because I'm not an educator and I'll never purport to know what you're going through. But if the first way we can come about addressing this overwhelming stress that you're going through is by fighting viciously for the cost of living increase to your wages that you've been denied for over 15 years, then we need to drive buses of our educators to Austin to fight for it. We are going into a session where we are going to have thank goodness, a surplus to work with. There's going to be a ton of special interest pulling at this money. But the number one thing we need to be fighting for is for our educators' salaries and wages down here. Because without our teachers, there's no future. Everyone is talking about the critical potential shortage of our frontline workers. But the next frontier that we are so close to facing is the overwhelming dropout of our teachers. I talk to an educator every other day who tells me, Erin, I had a panic attack once a week. I am going to be forced to retire early before maturity, not because I want to, but because my husband doesn't want me to pass before him. This is overwhelming. And so it's a non-option. fighting for an increase in your wages, to your existing wages, and to our retired teachers, TRS. That cost of living increase also hasn't happened in over a decade. My grandparents are retired teachers who tell me, Erin, the cost of living goes up, and I'm just learning to live on less and less because I keep living longer. And this is a crisis we should not find ourselves in. Whatever I can do to work with the legislatures and TEA to get our teachers at competitive wages where they can afford to go to the grocery store and live in the homes that we're living in here in the Valley, whose property value has skyrocketed due to the expansion of, local projects, i.e. SpaceX, which is wonderful. But if we can't continue to afford to live in our communities, then what's it for? So I'm committed to fighting for our cost of living increase to wages. Absolutely. It's the least we can do.
Thank you.
And that leads us to our next question. Educators in this state feel a profound sense of disrespect, which you're speaking to. We do not feel valued by the powers that be. We do not feel included. If elected, how will you ensure experienced, highly qualified educators and school employees are respected and included in debates, decisions, and policies?
When I get asked this question, sometimes I think, guys, am I overcomplicating the issue? Isn't being a leader 101, meaning I bring my team to the table? Isn't a basic foundation of leadership, meaning that you have a method of means of communication and access to your leader? And that means not shutting the door when we have to have a difficult conversation. And guys, ladies and gentlemen, whether I want to or not, I know we're going to have some difficult conversations in the future because I am asking you to send me into an environment where I will be the minority, where we are going into, let's face it, a supermajority legislature that has already shown you how they felt about South Texas by the dramatic redistricting in Brownsville and in the western side of Cameron County. They are trying to diminish our voice. So we are going to have to come together, and I have to sit with you and say, help me come up with creative ways to involve you in every step of the process. And again, I believe that means you have an open line of communication with me constantly. I believe that means that I attend open meetings with you at our local level, and that I don't, again, as an attorney and as a state representative, I'm not going to purport to be an expert in something that I'm not. We feel disrespected because you don't feel like you're a part of the decision-making process. Decisions get handed to you later on these quote unquote unfunded mandates. Again, 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, and you're being left to figure it out after the fact. And that's not the answer. That feels like disrespect because you are the experts. This legislation and these decisions should be coming from the ground, from you up, not from the top down. And that's when we start to set ourselves with unrealistic standards, impossible mandates to carry out, and the stress level that you're experiencing now. So I have to include you in when I get past a proposed piece of legislation, AFT needs to be my first phone call, not what I think about it and then see what you think about it. I am your voice. This is not my opinion. These are yours. And that's what I'm asking you to do. So that's the number one method and means of support I can give you, is you knowing that you're going to be my first phone call.
Thank you.
What do you think about the debate over mask mandates for educators and students on public school campuses? As a state legislator, how would you address COVID-19 safety in schools?
In the past 2, almost 3 years now, we've gone through a really difficult roller coaster of a ride regarding these masks. We have seen a Republican leader at the state level, our governor, who on a federal level will say he is completely against federal control over his ability to issue a mandate, then turn around and do the same thing to us here at the local level. These are issues that I believe should be squarely in the hands of our local districts and leaders, depending on the severity of the issue locally, because you are the best ones to make that decision. And secondly, I think we're talking about, yet again, decisions being made by politicians who are not doctors and who are not educated in the field of science. When we talk about masks, when we talk about the safety of our students, we need to first be asking, are we making this decision based on science and evidence, or are we making these decisions based off the supercharged political issue of the time? And That's exactly how I feel. I will tell you that I have had the pleasure and the blessing to visit many of our local campuses. They are beautiful and amazing, and our children are happy, and our teachers are thriving in spite of all odds. But you cannot social distance in classrooms or in the hallways. It is impossible to think that we could COVID proof the classrooms by putting as much plexiglass or barriers as we try to put up. It's not going to happen. I will tell you that I've stood in hallways after the bell has rang and been surrounded by hundreds of students. And I was wearing a mask and so were they. And I will tell you that I felt safer personally. I can't, whatever decisions parents make at home, that's wonderful. But then when they pass the baton to you, what can I do to make our educators feel safe, protected, and happy? I've talked to a teacher just yesterday who told me that one of her friends had passed. This is a very sensitive time and again, a scary issue to deal with. I think those decisions need to be made based on science, evidence, and with our local administrators.
Thank you.
And now moving on to charter schools. Charter schools in Texas account for $3.6 billion in public education funding, but aren't accountable to locally elected school boards or the voters. This lack of accountability has led to serious abuses, with charter school operators paying for skybox tickets, private planes, and advertising with taxpayer dollars. What will you do to oversee the charter school system in Texas and protect the taxpayers from these abuses?
I love this question. I've met a lot of parents who believe in choice, and I have to respect and understand that. But I haven't met a single taxpayer who does not believe in transparency, accountability, and equity. I don't care whether we're talking about a charter school, whether we're talking about PUB, we are talking about taxpayer dollars being spent in a way that is not transparent and accessible to the taxpayer and to the public. That's absurd. If these issues, if this scandal, if this misuse of funds had happened at the BISD local level, we would be talking about indictments and grand juries. I think we were all in shock to see the way some of these monies were being spent when these articles came out. It is absurd and offensive to think that that is how public taxpayer dollars are being spent. I have drawn a hard line in the sand on this and am unquestionably committed to fighting for the equity and transparency and accountability with the way charter schools receive and utilize our public taxpayer monies. It's simply unacceptable. And again, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a school issue or an electricity issue with the grid. We want to know how our monies and our fees are being expended. This is an equitable issue that should not be a partisan issue. It's what's fair and it's what's right. And again, I think there's no doubt or question that one of the largest employers in our district is this ISD. There is no doubt and no question that if our public educators and administrators came out in force, that you would dictate the future of every politician, every open seat, and all policy made in Cameron County and Brownsville. So I think it's time that if this is how we feel and this is what we know as taxpayers and educators, we demand this equity, then we show up and vote like our life depends on it.
Thank you so much.
Our next question is, school districts are putting more and more work onto educators and asking for more each day. This is the biggest reason Best AFT launched our We Deserve Better campaign. Our biggest demands are for real pay raises, a cutback on excessive paperwork and redundant paperwork, and a real voice for educators in policies and decisions about these issues at the local level. How will you address these concerns and support our campaign?
Ms. Garcia, I think this question is not a matter of what I want to do. This question is how many teachers want to show up for themselves to early vote for their pay raise. because I have told everyone with ears who will listen that that is what I am committed to doing. So if that is something that matters to you, to your friend, to your retired educator, it is something that we need to show up and vote like our life depends on it. Because I am committed to fighting for your pay raise. I am committed to being your voice. And that means having an open door and an open ear and an open line of communication to making sure that policies and procedures are made from the ground up, from you, from my boots on the ground, from my experts on the ground, not from a politician, not from a private interest policy group in Austin, but from our educators who are the ones in the thick of it every single day. So if you are tired of being issued, for example, these 30-hour requirements for each failing class, knowing that that is impracticable on any level for any child, then show up like that child's life depends on it. Then show up like, again, your salary, your ability to go to the grocery store depends on it, because you are the mass, you are the numbers. If our public educators and administrators show up, we won't be having this discussion. This election shouldn't be close. It should be a 4-1. You should dictate the future of how we administer policies and procedures for our local community. That's what I'm asking us to do. There not a day goes by that I meet a teacher that doesn't tell me the rules and regs that are being passed are just impracticable and I cannot continue to live like this. Then help me help you. It's not going to be easy, but we have to start now by fighting for a representative and a voice who wants to work with you at the ground level to get it done. That's what I'd like to do. I don't want to continue to allow these unfunded mandates that are unrealistic, continuing to push more and more hours on you without getting rid of some of the old, getting rid of some of the unnecessary, the superfluous training requirements. Let's start there. Let's shave it off and let's focus on with what you know is necessary to adapt and move forward. I don't want to continue to overwhelm and burden you.
Thank you very much.
And now, if you wouldn't mind answering some questions from our viewers.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So we have what are your thoughts on the governor calling for a special election on May 24th for this position?
I want everyone to know that I was just as surprised as you were. That is certainly not what we had planned in mind. But am I happy to do it? Yes, absolutely. Do I hope that, God willing, we find ourselves in a position where March 1st, after our BISD comes out to vote in mass, that we are your next state representative and your first female state representative at that we say, okay, Erin, thank you for taking the torch. But now, how are we going to put ourselves in a position where Brownsville is in a position of seniority and leadership? And that is, the governor can't appoint you. I have to run. Again, in our special election. After redistricting, the district that I ran in is just Brownsville. The district that we would have to run in for the special election, which Eddie Lucio III has vacated, is the old District 38, which is the western half of Cameron County. So the special election is being called to run in that old district for the remainder of his term, because the spot that I'm running for currently, District 38, would take place and begin January 1st of 2023. So in order to take over those 6 months before January, we have to run and we have to win in May. What does that mean and why is that important to Brownsville? That would make us senior in years to the next 30 or so representatives that are going to come in January 2023. What does that mean and why is seniority important? We get Brownsville as a district, and District 38 would then be recognized for better primetime spots on committee positions and legislative opportunities. Better committees and better positioning means more authority for our district. So we need to vote in this election and in our special election in May, like the future and the seniority of Brownsville depends on it, because it does. After losing Eddie Lucio III, we've lost over 14 years of legislative experience in seniority. Right. We faced the same thing after losing Renee. So now the one way Brownsville and our district can get it back is by ensuring that our public education advocate wins in both March and May to obtain that seniority.
Thank you. Denise, would you like to ask one of the questions in the chat from the viewers?
I can see one of our questions in the chat that I'd love to talk about. Is that okay?
That's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a question here regarding kindergarten through 12th grade classes aligning with students to prepare for college and future jobs. And one thing that I want to discuss here is that what are we going to do to make sure not only that there are future job opportunities in Brownsville, but that our students want to come home to them? And one thing that I've talked about at length is my strong desire to create Brownsville's first skilled labor task force. I have been the attorney for Texas Workforce for over 7 years now. I love it very much, but I am sick and tired of sitting at the table hearing that Brownsville and South Texas just lost out on yet another industry opportunity. I am tired of hearing that our existing industry cannot have their workforce needs met because we simply do not produce enough skilled laborers in our community. So I've gone around and I've seen how, Texas Workforce can't legally advertise with their tax dollars. So Texas Workforce and our executive director goes around talking to entities and individuals and says, hey, BISD, I have this money for this program. Would you like to participate? And BISD says, yes, but in this capacity, because we're also focusing on this. They go to the city of Brownsville. Brownsville, I have this money. Would you like to participate? Yes, but we're kind of focused on this right now. If you're getting my point, we're not all on the same page about our timeline with which we need to produce these employees. And quite frankly, how can I ask BISD to do this when BISD is so preoccupied with losing our students out to a campaign or an agenda being lodged by their counterpart of 100% enrollment in college?
Right.
So BISD says, Erin, I have to focus on 100% enrollment, whether our students need it or not, whether our community needs it or not, because I can't handle the way public education and funding are taken from our public ed schools to keep up with this agenda. So if I would love BISD, the city of Brownsville, the Port of Brownsville, TSC, and its wonderful programs there to all sit at the same table and partner with Texas Workforce to say, how can I create an agenda and a timeline that says this is how we'll stop the brain drain of our community? This is how we'll stop pushing students to take out, $40,000 in student loans that maybe everybody doesn't need to stay here in our community and to get real good paying jobs here at home. Because we can send our students and our children and our loved ones out, but can we promise that they'll come back? No. A lot of my friends didn't come back home after graduating because they said, Erin, that's lovely that you have a job, that your father's been an attorney for 40 years and that you knew what you wanted to do your whole life. I didn't. And the job I want doesn't exist there. So I do believe that with this task force, when all of our entities and agencies come together to sit at the same table, we will create an agenda to say, look, we're going to produce 5,000, for example, welders, electricians, scaffolders, diesel mechanics. I had a beautiful conversation the other day with a Border Patrol officer who said, Erin, over the summer, my son wanted to take a course to be a diesel mechanic, but he was not qualified to receive that funding from Texas Workforce because he wasn't, quote unquote, an at-risk student. And he goes, and I didn't budget that for this year. So I couldn't afford for him to take that over the summer. That was devastating to me. And his child was in the top 10%, but was truly interested and wanted to take this skilled labor course. We need to create avenues for our children to be able to explore this and to be eligible to receive the funding from Texas Workforce to do it here at home, because we have to find a way to begin to keep up. This labor shortage isn't just a problem here in Brownsville. It's a problem all over the state of Texas. But I think if we start this skilled labor task force here, we will be a model for the rest of the state of Texas and how communities will begin to compete economically and competitively. But it's going to start here, and we're going to show them how to do it by all coming together to sit at the same table and partner with Texas Workforce. We're going to keep our students here, and we're going to create our jobs here. And we're going to meet existing industry needs and attract future industry by doing so. I'm confident that I can do that with you, and I'd love to get started.
Thank you for that answer. So another question from another one of our viewers is, what support will you have for teachers, aside from what you've already voiced? What is the first major change that you will do for educators?
I've talked to so many educators who feel like the door for communication just isn't being open for them. You need to know that I will work with you to be that transition, that middleman, to speak with existing administration, to speak with your board, to be your voice here and in Austin. I want to bring everyone together to the table to have this conversation and discussion. The number one thing we can do for our educators is to make sure you know that your voice is being heard. I have to be able to do that. That is exactly the role that I'm asking for, to be an open door, a line of communication. You have to feel like you have that in your leader and in your elected representative. And I'm committed to being that. Aside from right after that, we got to fight for that pay raise. We got to fight for that cost of living adjustment. I've talked with a multitude of our unions and our laborers down here who say, Erin, when you do fight for that allotment of funding, make sure that you tell the district, the locality, exactly how it should be spent. Don't leave it up to the locality to assume that the funding will be distributed in the way you imagined it would. Make sure that those funds are specifically earmarked, whether that's in a percentage, whether that's in a specific allotment, but make sure that you do help us. We believe in local control, but make sure you help tell the locality this much needs to be spent specifically on educators. And so I think that's another way that we can work together to say, how can I make sure you get exactly what we're fighting for?
Right, and that leads us to our final question, which was regarding that, because in the past that hasn't really been the case. When things are not specified, people feel shortchanged. So
yeah. And I think if I had the answer, I would have won when I was 30 years old and ran for this spot the first time against Eddie Lucio III. I'm not ever going to purport to be the expert on this. We're in a new frontier of all types of issues, pandemic, an all-time low in morale. But I want to work with you to say, what can I do to make sure that you stay here, to make sure that you retire when you envisioned, not early because your health depends on it. I want to make sure that that you feel safe and that our children are safe, and that going to school and going to work in the morning is something that we dream and look forward to, not something that we dread and can't wait to get out of. I can't begin to explain to you the trauma that has been relayed to me by educators on a daily basis. My heart hurts for you, but it motivates me every single day to try harder, to be louder, and to fight. I want you to know that I can truly, compassionately empathize with what's going on. I hear it from my grandparents. I hear it from my mother, who was an academic advisor at UTB TSC for over 10 years, who told me, over 10 years ago, Erin, we are having a problem keeping our kids here. We're having a problem administering the STEM curriculum to boys and girls. What can we do? She was telling me the sirens were there over a decade ago. I want you to know that I'm committed to doing that. I was explaining to you, Ms. Garcia, earlier before we began that I worked the 2008 session with Renee Oliveda when I heard the word voucher for the first time. And that was, oh my goodness, it was the beginning of just this cataclysmic rift in public education. I saw teachers being bussed up to Austin in hordes. It was truly a phenomenon that I'd never seen before. And there is no reason that your voices should have been outshined by special interests. We've come a long way since 2008, and we've seen charter schools and this method of funding turn into something that I don't think was ever envisioned, but we're dealing with it now. And I want to make sure that your voices are still there when we continue to make these decisions, so that we don't have, a test trial turn into something else that we never envisioned again. We have to keep fighting. I worked the 2010 session with a public advocacy firm. So I worked on the lobbyist side. I have worked both sides of the session. I have written speeches for representatives who you wouldn't imagine. I have researched inside and out bills on issues that you would have never known, I took part in. And it was amazing. I loved it. I've seen both sides of the session, and I can't wait to be our voice front and center on exactly this issue and help fight for us and relay in the most compassionate, aggressive manner to a group of complete strangers and peers what my client here in Brownsville in District 38 needs to happen. But I want to do that with you.
Thank you so much. Any final statements you'd like to make before we close this evening?
Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot thank AFT enough for hosting this. I cannot thank you for what you do every single day. Thank you for not quitting. Thank you for believing in the system. Thank you for believing in the the impact that you have on children every day who we can't even begin to imagine what they're going through at home. But they know that it is their safe haven to go to you. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for tremendous and amazing educators in my life. I am so grateful for what you do. And I vow I am committed to fighting for the respect that you deserve, for the pay that you deserve, for the safety that you deserve in our beautiful hometown. There is no reason that your numbers shouldn't absolutely dominate this election. There is no reason that your voice shouldn't dictate the future of any policy in District 38. You are the majority, you are the force, you are the numbers, and let's vote like our future depends on it. I cannot do it without you, and I am perpetually grateful for your trust and your confidence to assume this role. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope that you tell your friends, your family members, your educators, your non-educator friends to go out there and vote at 9 a.m. when the polls open on Tuesday. Do not wait until March 1st. Go vote next week like our life depends on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin Elizabeth Gamez. Texas AFT is proud to support your campaigns, and we look forward to working together to advocate for our schools, students, and school staff. And a big thank you to our panelists who are doing this hard work every day in and outside of the classrooms. We appreciate you being here tonight. To those at home, this concludes our program for the evening. We'd like to thank everyone for attending Best AFT's Town Hall this evening. Before we go, I want to invite viewers to check out our Brownsville Educators Stand Together Facebook page to learn more about our We Deserve Better campaign. And sign our pledge for updates on how to get involved. And of course, go out and vote. Early voting is on until February 25th, and Election Day is on March the 1st. Thank you and good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Nice evening.
You too. Have a beautiful evening, guys.
Likewise.